You're listening to Make Some Noise podcast, episode number 721 with guest Thais Sky. Welcome to Make Some Noise podcast, your guide for strategies, tools, and insight to empower yourself. I'm your host, Andrea Owen, global speaker, entrepreneur, life coach since 2007, and author of 3 books that have been translated into 18 languages and are available in 22 countries. Each week, I'll bring you a guest or a lesson that will help you maximize unshakable confidence, master resilience, and make some noise in your life. You ready? Let's go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am so glad that you're here. And yes, I might sound a little bit different. I'm not on my usual microphone, but it's just for this introduction. This particular episode is a rebroadcast from one of my favorite people that I've had here on the show, Thais Sky. And I went back to her website to grab some additional things for her bio, and I really need to have her back on. So this episode that you're hearing is from an interview I did with Thais in 2019. So it's been several years, but I loved this conversation so much. It's been one of my favorites over the years that I've been doing this podcast. I wanted to re-air it. And so I'm going to go ahead and let it play as it is and share just something additional in her bio. But before I do that, I want to make sure that I remember to invite you to a free training that I'm doing the night before my birthday, April 14th, 2026, just in case you're listening to this in the future. April 14th in 2026, I am going to be hosting a free training with my dear friend Shannon Kaiser, who is a fellow writer and author. And we're doing this free live training for anyone who likes to write. And if you have a story inside of you that you've been circling, you want to make sure that you get this story out somehow. Is it a Substack or an actual whole memoir or a series of Facebook posts, whatever it is? Because in this training, we're going to talk about why people procrastinate when it comes to writing things that matter the most to us. We're also going to talk about differentiating between your inner critic and true discernment, and why confusing those two stops so many writers. We're going to talk about all things AI and how that's reshaping the world of writing. And it might be something that you haven't realized yet. Oh, and one more thing. We're going to talk about procrastination and how it might help you. So at any rate, if you're interested in coming to this free training, it's the evening of April 14th. Head on over to the show notes to grab the link. And it's at shesavesherself.org/write-the-thing. Or you can just make it easy on yourself. Go grab the link in the show notes. And that is all the announcements I have for you today. So I'm going to let the episode play and also have the 2019 version of me read Thais's bio. But the only thing I want to add is that since we recorded this particular episode, Thais has gone on to get her master's in clinical psychology, specializing in trauma and spiritual depth psychology. And Thais is also now a licensed psychotherapist. So without further ado, I'm going to let this baby play. Thais, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to talk to you. You and I met, well, it's been a long time. It's been almost a year when I was kind of touring the United States on my book tour. And I am so lucky to have gotten the chance to hug you in the flesh. And I am excited about this conversation because our work is so complementary. And let me just jump in, because the first thing someone sees when they land on your website are the words, reclaiming your worth is a radical act. So can you tell us, what does reclaiming look like? What does that mean?
Yeah, I love the word reclaim. You know, I think when we're talking about claiming something, we're talking about taking something on that's new. But I believe that our worth is not new. The concept of worthiness is not a new concept that we have to create within ourselves. It's something that we are already inherent, but we've kind of forgotten along the way for a multitude of reasons. We've forgotten because of our culture. We've forgotten because of our upbringing. We've forgotten because it benefits the larger reality if we feel unworthy, right? So for me, I'm obsessed with this idea of how can we reclaim our sense of worthiness and unhook ourselves from the tantalizing capitalistic narrative that tells us that our worth is tied to our productivity. Mm-hmm. Our worth is tied to how our body looks. Our worth is tied to how we appear to the world, you know?
Like the first thing that came to me when I was listening to you say that, like, that is like a big, green, hairy, scary monster. But I don't, and I mean, just what I mean by that is because it can be multi-layered and multifaceted. And like you said, because it can come from our family of origin, from our culture, from past relationships, and untangling and unlearning that is work. And I love that you use the word reclaim.
Yeah.
Well, follow up to that last question. This is maybe what you were jumping into. So what are a few, like, even just like one small step that someone can take towards reclaiming their worth? Or maybe like, where do you start with clients when you first start working with them?
That's a big question.
I know. Because it depends.
It does depend. But here's the thing. So the reason why I've even started doing my work with the concept of worthiness is because I think it's very understood from a cultural perspective that having a sense of worth is key to the things that we want in our lives, whether that's happiness or freedom or fulfilling relationships. We have this sense that worthiness is the answer. Like, we have this sense that if we feel worthy enough of blank, there's going to be less obstacles to that blank. But the problem is, whenever I read any self-development book, I've poured through hundreds of them. You know, everyone talks about the importance of worth, but no one really talks about how to cultivate that sense of worth. And it's different. Cultivating worthiness is different than cultivating confidence. Mm-hmm. Confidence is a space of, like, the more you do something, the more confident you feel about that thing. Whereas worthiness, I coach women from, entrepreneurs to women in the corporate world. And there are women who have been doing this for 10, 20 years, that they've been on their career path, or they've been, practicing this hobby for so long, and they still don't feel worthy enough of the success that they want or the happiness that they want, et cetera, et cetera. Because it's not just about building a specific skill set like confidence. So I just wanted to put that as like the foundation. The reason why I think worthiness is such an important conversation is because the more that we can feel worthy, the less we believe the narrative that's keeping us oppressed, that's keeping us feeling like we don't belong on this planet. Mm-hmm. And so worthiness and belonging go hand in hand for me. And so what do we do? Well, I think the first really critical and important step to recognizing and reclaiming our worth is getting really real with ourselves on where we feel unworthy. Because I think oftentimes we have a lot of shame around our worthiness wound. We don't want to admit that we feel unworthy of XYZ. We blame it on other things. We say, it's because I don't want a relationship, or, I don't need, that opportunity anyway. And we shut down the conversation. Because it's scary and sometimes embarrassing to admit that we have a space within us that feels like we can't take up space, that we can't go after what we want. And so while I recognize that the shame is there, I invite all of us to go a layer deeper and to be really, really real with ourselves on where we feel like we're not worthy. Because only when we can really be unapologetic about seeing where we are not, can we actually do something different.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is a perfect first step. And it really depends. And I think that I'm always an encourager of breaking down parts of your life, because I think that personal development can feel overwhelming at times, especially when that self-awareness comes in and then you look around and like the lights could just come on and you're like, oh shit, there's a lot to do here. And I always tell people, practice self-compassion in those moments. We've all been in that place. If you play personal development long enough, it's going to happen.
There's such a deep connection, I think, about the self-development industry and the worthiness wound. And the connection that I see is that while the self-development industry wants, quote unquote, like the the overarching message of the self-development industry is that it wants people to feel confident, wants people to feel self-actualizing, and wants people to be enlightened, et cetera, et cetera. That's the narrative that the self-development industry says. Anyone can do it. If you just work hard enough.
Just try hard enough. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. But what people don't recognize, in order for the self-development industry to exist, it has to feed off of your worthiness wound. So in order for the books to sell, the programs to sell, et cetera, I mean, in many, many ways, the marketing is, you're broken, I have the answer. Mm-hmm. You're sorry, like this has sucked and this is really bad, but guess what? I have the answer and let me show you the way.
Yeah.
And then it becomes like a form of gaslighting. It becomes very confusing for us because, like, well, wait a minute. Like, we want to heal this place within us, but it seems like the more search we do, the more broken we feel. Mm-hmm. How does that work? And that's why a lot of what I do and the perspective that I emphasize is there's nothing broken. And the worthiness wound, the existence of the worthiness wound is not an indication that there's something broken.
I feel like it just means that we're human.
100%. Exactly. It means that we're human. It means that we're having a human experience. It means that there's an invitation here. Yeah. I always look at a wounding as an invitation. Mm-hmm. Instead of seeing it as, oh my God, there's this thing, I got to fix it. I got to find all the ways that I can run away from it, is what we're essentially saying. The opportunity is, can we look at this wounding as an invitation to deepen into ourselves?
Yes, I love that last part. Well, and I don't know if you have experienced this as well, but, I've been doing this for, let's see, I started Your Kick-Ass Life in 2010. So it's been a minute. And I pretty quickly, I would say at least the third year, realized the moral dilemma of what you were just talking about, because I found that there were certain people, not all of them by any stretch, but there were certain people that wanted to, participate in my programs or hire me one-on-one. And maybe some of them even said it out loud. They wanted me to fix them. And I had to be very clear, like, this is not what this is. I can't. I'm not magic. I don't have any mind control. And this is a lifelong process. Like the marketing experts don't want us to tell people that. Mm-hmm. They want us to say, like, no, I have the answer and this is it. And you're going to be fixed and cured at the end of this. And what I've had to tell people, especially when I have calls with people who are going to come to a retreat or do something that's higher end, because there's a lot of like one-on-one participation with me, is that I am not the boss of you. Like, I can't magically fix you. And it really is within yourself. And this is just one of the steps of many that you will take in your personal development journey that is going to get you closer to yourself. What do you think about that?
100%. Yeah, I love that. And I say that, like, whenever we come with the energy of, I want you to fix me, I am always very tender in that space, very tender.
I've been a student in that place, so I know what that's like, that desperate place.
Mm-hmm. I have too. Yeah, we're so desperate. And I think that is so divine, because that desperation is actually coming from a deeper longing. And that longing is the highest space within us, craving for us to move forward away from the pain that we have felt for so long, to be the only option for us. So I love that craving. I love that longing. And yes, it leads into desperation. That's where we need to attune, and we need to take a step back, and we need to breathe and recognize that no one is going to save us. But at the same time, it's so beautiful that we have that longing, we have that craving. So we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's just, we do want to recognize that, the reason why I think so many of us want somebody else to save us is because we're terrified of taking responsibility for our lives. And when I talk about taking responsibility, I'm always amazed at how skewed this conversation is, because for many of us, particularly women, we're taught to take responsibility, things that aren't ours to take responsibility for, like the emotions of others and how other people react, and because we're so emotionally attuned, we take that on as our own stuff. And then there's so many areas of our lives where we don't take responsibility, and we really hope that somebody else can save us. And so developing a new relationship with this concept of taking self-responsibility is such a beautiful opportunity for us to really recognize where there are places where we just don't want to take ownership of our lives. And that's really okay. it's okay to be there. It's just then you got to ask yourself, well, if I don't want to take responsibility and I don't, and I want change, that's a real catch-22 here. What am I willing to do about it?
Mm-hmm. I see it. I see that happen sometimes especially with women who have had really difficult romantic relationships. And because I'm like raising my hand over here because this was me. This was me too. I went from relationship to relationship, putting all of my worthiness in my partner. And if he just treated me a certain way and loved me the way that I really, really wanted to be loved, then I would feel worthy. And this wasn't, at that time, it wasn't conscious. I just felt like I'd be happier. We would all be happier if he just behaved like I wanted him to. And then as soon as I came out of that and kind of saw the light and picked my head up out of the dirt, then I was looking for the next quote unquote answer. So personally, it wasn't until I was like, oh, you mean this is all on me? And you're right. You used the word like terrified. Like I was terrified because I didn't know how to trust myself. I didn't know. Like there was this whole concept of like self-love. I'm like, what does that even look like? I had to start from the beginning. And I have such a soft place in my heart for women in that place, because like you said, it's a beautiful place to be when you pick your head up and realize that when the shift for me happened, like, oh wait, this is actually really powerful that I have the opportunity to do this. That I felt like was, explosions happening.
100%. I love that. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious too, because you talk about, when you talk about healing worthiness, you talk about healing the little girl within. So what do you see a lot with your clients with doing, do you call it inner child work or what do you do? What do you think?
Yeah, I call it inner child work. This was a tool that my healer taught me when I was recovering from disordered eating, and it revolutionized my life. This concept that there's multiple parts of us, and there is a part within all of us that is frozen in time at a time when we didn't know what to do. We didn't have any skills for navigating what was going on in our lives. And so that part of our psyche is still at that age. And more times than not, whenever we're having strong emotional reactions, whenever we're responding from a very wounded place and we feel collapsed, we feel incapable of like really being in our logic and we're just spiraling, typically that's the reaction of our little girl. And so it's a great opportunity for us to give space for her and develop a relationship with her. And what happens when we do that is we actually, have more autonomy in our lives. We feel like we have more ability to respond versus reacting.
The world moves fast. Your workday, even faster. Pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data. Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use. Helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize. So you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/M365 Copilot.
Yes, I get curious in those moments because, again, I still have those moments. I get triggered.
Yeah, we all do.
Yeah. It's an opportunity. It's like there's that term AFGO, another fucking growth opportunity. And I look at those moments as that. I mean, I'm not particularly happy about them, but I think all of us have them. No matter how long you've been doing this work, you're still going to have those moments where you don't think logically, you react, you might get passive aggressive, you might get angry, you might rage, just not act like your best self. And
I just think it's adorable that like we think that by doing the self-development work that somehow we'll become less human. I like that just because
sorry, everybody.
This like spiritual work for 10 years that like I won't ever be sad, right? Or that I won't ever like have a reactive moment. That's an illusion. That's not in any way, shape, or form based out of reality. It's a fantasy. It's a fantasy that we have because we don't know how to deal with our humanness.
Yeah.
And that I don't blame us. Like we don't know how to deal with our humanness because we live in an emotionally illiterate society that perpetuates our wounding and keeps us in a spiral of being busy and being productive. And listen, we weren't taught the right tools. We weren't. However, we get to now teach ourselves these tools, and the tools doesn't take away our humanness. It teaches us how to navigate them with a little bit more grace. My work, the work that I do with my clients, the work that I do for myself, it's all about expanding my container of being with the fullness of my expression. It's not about denying my sadness or oh, if I meditate enough, then I'll never feel sad. Or, oh, if I positive think myself enough, then nothing bad will ever happen to me. That's a fantasy.
Yeah.
And it's not healthy. We want to experience the full spectrum of the human experience. It's not about limiting that experience. It's about being able to hold it without collapsing. It's about being able to be stronger, resilient, more capable of navigating all of these things without it meaning something detrimental, bad, horrendous about who we are.
Yeah.
That's the real work. And so it's adorable when like I talk to people and they, say, well, I've been doing this work for a bajillion years, but I still got sad over that. And it's like, fuck, of course you still got sad over that. You're
right?
human.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're here to do, is to experience all of these emotions. It's just, how do we experience them so that they inform us instead of dictate our lives? And that's a huge difference.
Yes. They inform us instead of dictating our lives. So it's instead, and this is what I tell my clients all the time when I can tell that they've either put me up on a pedestal or just assume that because I remember for years and years and years, I saw the same therapist, and there came a day where I felt so defeated, and I had made up a story that her life was perfect. And I looked at her and I said, and I know this is not part of the therapy model, and this was bad. This was a long time ago when I think even less therapists were ever expressing their own stuff. And I looked at her and I said, can you please just tell me one hard thing that's happened in your marriage? Because I'm making up that you have a perfect marriage. And she started laughing and she told me something. But I trust people more when they are kind of like a candy cane, when it's the dark and light. I can see both. And it's exactly, and I tell my clients this all the time, the difference between me now than the me 12 years ago when I first started doing this work is that I can navigate this with resilience and a little bit more grace. And trust me, there are times when I am not my best self, when I've been passive aggressive with my husband, when I've snapped at somebody and I have to turn around and go clean it up with my tail between my legs a little bit. And it's not my favorite moments, but it's just about not letting those feelings and triggers and old patterns dictate your thoughts, your decisions, your behaviors for longer than it needs to.
100%.
I hope you do spoken word poetry, because I love listening to you preach. You have such a great way. I just think how expressive you are is just beautiful. I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, speaking of preaching, I know you speak a lot about very important social justice issues. And you said before we started recording, you said you can't talk about the worthiness wound without talking about whiteness. So can you tell us about what you mean by that?
Yeah, when we look at what contributes to the worthiness wound, one of the many contributors is our culture, right? Yeah. I mean, as women, we get to really be viscerally aware of how we were not taught the same skills. We were not treated in the same way as men. And therefore, it is very clear how men have less of this sense of unworthiness than we do. And of course, I'm stereotyping here. Yeah. I'm painting broad brush
generalizing.
Generalizing, that's the word. Yes. But then the more marginalized of an identity we carry, the greater the pressure from our culture to have a worthiness wound, because our culture tells us that if you look a certain way and act a certain way, if you are this perfect idealized woman, then you will be protected, you will be safe, you will be happy. And as you deviate from that norm, the more you're inherently punished for not being what you should be according to our culture. And so one of the many systems that perpetuate our worthiness wound is whiteness, as well as cis heteronormativity, as well as patriarchy. And so our white supremacy culture tells us that beauty is through the lens of whiteness. And that if you are white and if you perpetuate the narrative of whiteness, then you will be okay. And if you're not, the more you deviate from that lens of whiteness, the more you're shunned, the more you're not okay, the more you're broken, the more you need to fix yourself, the more you need to experience a sense of unworthiness as a shame mechanism to get you back to normal. You know what I mean? Like normal as our culture defines it. So, we have to be looking at these systems if we're to really address the worthiness wound. And whiteness, white supremacy is embedded in every single system in our culture. And so part of the work of doing our own internalized healing is also recognizing how our behavior, our actions, our experience, our embodiment is impacting and affecting other people. And that includes, as a white woman, how my whiteness is perpetuating white supremacy.
How did you, I know Desiree Adaway loves to ask the question, like, what radicalized you? What made you come to all of these realizations in your own personal life?
Yeah, I'm not unlike many other white women who kind of woke up when Trump was elected.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the only thing that was going on. I think it was just all coincided. It was like one big, just all these different forces coming together.
Clusterfuck, I think is the word you're looking for with this topic.
Yeah, there was a lot of things coming together. I was doing some deeper healing around my mother wound and around my relationship with my mother that was allowing me to kind of step more and more into my own power. I was getting very jaded with the coaching industry, and I talk a lot about that on my podcast. I mean, I just felt so frustrated by an industry that perpetuates this lifestyle marketing as the answer to all of your problems. Like, look at me, look how beautiful and amazing I am. I live such a beautiful life. Look at my private jet. I make millions of dollars. So obviously you can't too, because I'm just a small girl from a small town, from a small bumfuck. So like, if I'm this way, you can be this way too. And I was participating in that 100% in lifestyle marketing and this idea of putting myself on this pedestal, and it wasn't working for me. I was feeling incongruent, and I was feeling frustrated in this industry that continues to objectify women in this way. I joined a Facebook group that's no longer in existence, but I joined this Facebook group where there was a lot of conversations on social justice, and I wasn't aware of anything social justice. I didn't know what that really meant. And there were a lot of conversations in that group about whiteness and white supremacy, and white people are inherently racist just because of the color of their skin, and that we have work to do to unpack our whiteness. And of course, like most white people waking up to their whiteness, there was a lot of, who, me? Like, that's not me. Like, I don't do that. I don't participate in that way.
Look at what a good white person I am.
Exactly. I'm an immigrant also. I'm from Brazil. So like, there was also that, like, I'm not American. Like, this isn't my shit. Like, I don't need to own this. Right. And the more I participated in that group, and then Trump got elected, and I was feeling really embodied and empowered in a different way in my personal life, it all just came together for me to just have that awakening of, oh, holy shit, I'm white. That means something, and that means something in our culture. And so I was disgusted at my business, and not from a judgmental space, because I didn't know any better, quote unquote, but from a genuine, like, oh my gosh, like I'm talking about the empowerment of women. I believe in the empowerment of all women. But really, if you go to my business, if you hear what I'm talking about, I'm really only empowering white women.
People that look like me.
People that look like me and have my same lived experience. And like, I don't want, that did not sit right with me. I did not want to be that person. And so I completely dismantled my business and built it back up. I joke that I built it back up brick by brick. Obviously I don't have a brick and mortar business, but built my business back up and questioning myself every step of the way. Like, how can I make sure that my business is inclusive, but not just as a performative allyship sort of way. I was like, hey, look at me, I'm inclusive, but from a genuine, like, how can I make sure that my work embodies the full spectrum of the human experience? And it took a lot of work, as anyone does when they're undoing their lens. And but it also gave me such a tremendous amount of depth of understanding the worthiness wound at a different level, because I really started to recognize and understand just how much culture plays a role in our worthiness wound. Because, for white people, because we don't see our race is the normal race, so we don't see our race, it's very hard for us to recognize where culture perpetuates our worthiness. more so if you are, let's say, a white man, it's even harder for you to see systems of oppression and how those oppressive systems dictate our worth. And so it's important for us to be recognizing, regardless of our race and gender, we have to be seeing how our society perpetuates worthiness not only within ourselves, but within other people, if we are to do radical healing.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many things I want to underscore in what you just said. And I so appreciate you sharing your experience. I didn't know. I'm always curious about, what radicalized people. And I thought I had made up that you've been doing this work for way, way longer, that it had been like, from the beginning of time. Cause I know you and I have only known each other for, I don't know, maybe over a year or so.
Yeah.
And I also feel like, and I know that there's a handful of coaches that listen to this podcast. And I really feel like if you are in the wellness industry, whether you're in fitness, health and fitness, or personal development, I feel like you cannot ignore this. And it's just one of those things where I had Andrea Renee Johnson on here, and she wrote a really, really great blog post, and I'm going to link to it in the show notes, where she talks about what you were briefly saying about how if you're someone who, teaches, preaches, educates, whatever, on women's empowerment, you have got to take a step back and look at the big picture and look at everything from the copy on your website to your stock photos to the emails that you send out to your social media posts. And this isn't to blame and shame anybody. This is just like, part of doing the work. Are you having a very narrow lens on, like we just said, oh, wait, this is great, but pretty much only for people that look like me. And, I'm in a class right now and called Foundations of Social Justice. And I haven't talked about it on the podcast for a couple of reasons. A, I'm not done with it. And I want to make sure that I've absorbed everything so I can talk about it eloquently. I'm going to have the teacher on as a guest too, but also because holy shit, like this class I had to write my teacher an email because it's interesting. A couple of things have happened in this class. I have come to the realization that I have some work to do, and I'm in the work right now of healing from my own many things, many things, but more specifically as it pertains to this conversation, the rage that I have around rape culture in general and my own so much sexual harassment and some sexual assaults and just so much sexual harassment throughout my life. And granted, it's slowed down a lot since I've reached middle age now. It's not as much, but I was noticing in my comments in the class that I was just really cynical and and my teacher pointed it out. And I said, you know what? I appreciate that you pointed out my cynicism because this comes from a very wounded place. And I'm not just angry. I have a lot of rage around it. And so I'm working on that, but it's interesting to be in a class and learning about these topics when I am both the oppressed and the oppressor. And it's really complicated. That's the only word I can think of right now. It's complicated emotions and feelings, and it's heavy.
Yeah. And actually, I talk about this a lot in my work, but in this scope, a little bit, because I think it's really important, is holding the both and. The both and is to be able to hold two, what seems to be juxtapositioning concepts, ideas, feelings, and be able to hold both as part of our human experience. And so that looks like, when someone dies and we feel both the grief and the relief. And then we feel guilt because we're not supposed to feel the relief. We're supposed to only feel the sadness of the death. And it's like, well, what if you can hold both? What if both are allowed to be here? What would that look like? What would you have to feel if you gave yourself permission to allow both to exist? And for most of us, what we would have to feel is that we're human. And again, we live in this fantasy of believing that if we can pull ourselves into this fantasy that we're not human, we never have to feel hurt again. And it doesn't work that way. It's a false shield that doesn't allow us to then have the right tools to navigate this stuff, right? Like if we're perpetuating this idea of positive thinking, we don't learn the tools of how to navigate things when shit hits the fan, right? So like, in this particular case, holding the possibility that we're both the oppressor and the oppressed is so important, because then we can use our understanding of where we are oppressed to have greater compassion and understanding and awareness for where we oppress.
Yeah.
And I just want to remind all of us that there are so many areas of our lives for us to be exploring, like ableism and fat phobia. I mean, these are places that I don't think get enough attention, particularly in the wellness community. That, there's this concept of health at every size. And yet it's hard for so many people to reconcile with the fact that, people don't owe us their health.
No.
And we do not need to demand that anybody looks a certain way. And wherever we're perpetuating this idea of being skinny, of losing weight, of being, measuring your worth down to what's on the scale of what's your pant size, even if it's under the guise of empowerment, what we're doing is we're perpetuating fat phobic culture. We're perpetuating ableism. And we need to be careful with that because that's dehumanizing. It's dehumanizing to large swaths of people. So it's an important conversation, but there are so many intersections where we also have an opportunity to do exploration of the both and of holding the space that we are both the oppressor and the oppressed. And because you are the oppressor does not mean that you are a bad person.
Yeah.
And wherever there is that space, it's because there's a worthiness wound at play. And again, this is why I believe healing the worthiness wound is a radical act. Because when we can heal or step into greater awareness of our worthiness wound, then we can hold greater space for where we are the oppressor without making it us. Because when we make something mean about us, we're no longer naming the harm and putting the attention to where it matters.
Yeah. That's
right?
so important.
We need to be tuning into that and doing the work of healing the worthiness wound. I've seen to be a great way. It's not the only way. I'm not this only person. There's so many ways to this, but I found it to be such a great way to ease into this understanding that just because that we are oppressing does not mean we now get to spiral in shame and guilt, put our head back in the sand and check out from this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, I call that like having stamina. I wonder for me personally, because I've talked about challenging, and heavy topics for such a long time, I, hear people's shame stories on the regular and I can hold that space for them. And I've delved into my own many, many years. I feel like I made it through that very first part of, finding out, that I actually am a racist. That I am the oppressor. That I have all these, fat phobic and on and on and on. And I moved through that fairly quickly, just in terms of like that shame and that wound, so that I can now have the conversation and people can point out things that I've done that are racist or fat phobic or whatever it is. And I can take that in and know that I'm not a terrible person for having done that I'm an American who grew up in this shitty culture and learn from it. But I say that because I encourage people to step into the work, that if you are doing this work or even just hearing this conversation between me and Thais and feeling like, ooh, that wash of shame, that's okay. Like, keep walking forward. It will pass. What you need is the stamina to be able to have the conversations for longer periods of time with people and not like, just like you said so beautifully, not make it about you. It's not about you. It's about the system.
Exactly. And this is where I get excited, is when I see teachers use what has been traditionally tools to perpetuate white supremacy in the self-development industry, using those tools to actually help us navigate the complexity of the human experience. This is where I get really excited, because this is the way forward. I believe this is how we change systems in our industry, right? In this specific space. This tools of both and, this is in many ways a similar concept to love and light, which is to love all, to accept all, to embrace all. But oftentimes we use the concept of love and light to spiritually bypass the shadow. And it doesn't have to be that way. It does not have to be that way. We can use these tools. It's just a tool is a tool. It's like a hammer. We get to decide how to use it. And we get to use it in ways that will like completely turn whiteness on its head. But we can't really be having a conversation on whiteness without also broaching the topic of power. right? Because whiteness is all about power. And so recognizing power dynamics and recognizing where we're committed and ready and willing to put our power space down for other people is essential, or else it all becomes talk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such I need to have you on so we can just talk about this, because there's so many different avenues that we can go down, And well, and I'm curious what your take is on this, because, and this is something because I hear different opinions from different people. And what is your take on, I've heard around town, and what I mean by that is, on social media, which is, I know, not the answer to everything, is that two white women should not be having this conversation. And my argument is always, well, I am a white woman who my audience is I don't know. I would say a good portion of them are white, and they're interested in being better humans. And a lot of my guests, like yourself, are white, and they're also doing this work. And so I'm curious what your take is on that.
Yeah, it's a good question. Something that I've navigated as well. I have my podcast, Reclaim, and my dear friend Lindsay Ray and I have a series on the podcast called You're Waking Up to Your White Privilege, Now What? So it's like a 5-part series talking about whiteness. And when we were putting together the episodes and thinking about how we wanted to go about doing this, we asked ourselves, is it appropriate? Is it appropriate for these two white women to be talking about race? But here's the thing that I've settled with and feels really right for me is that, listen, I'm not an anti-racism educator. I do not position myself as an anti-racism educator. I amplify the fuck out of so many incredible women of color who are doing this work, and they need to be amplified. They need to be compensated for their work. And it's also very valuable as a white woman for me to be sharing my experiences around waking up to my whiteness. Because for many of us, as we navigate life, it's helpful to hear from other people who are similar to us, be going through an experience and sharing that experience and learning from that experience.
Yeah.
This can be thought in every single which way. If I'm navigating a broken leg, it's really helpful for me to see other people who have gone through this experience to show me the way. And so I think it is important that as white people, we're having this conversation, because we need to be talking about whiteness in our communities, not just whenever there's a person of color in the room or whenever the subject is on race. Something that I've noticed that I've become very conscious of on my podcast is, how often do I talk about race with my guests who are white versus how often do I talk about race with my guests who are non-white, right? Who are women of color. Do I expect my women of color guests to always talk about race? Do their lives have to be in their expertise? Does it have to be talking about race? Yes, no, right? And then am I expecting my white guests to not be defined by race and not have to talk about race because that's not a part of their lived experience, right?
Yeah.
So I've had to sit with that and really look at, how am I making sure that my conversations on race is founded on a deep understanding that just because as white people, we don't often feel like we have a race is just as much of a part of our experience as somebody else. And because we don't see our race, we then don't see other people's race. So then we perpetuate a system that oppresses and hurts and harms and abuses people of color, while we get to sit here and be like, I don't see color, I'm a racialized person.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautifully said. And it sounds like it's another instance where it's a both and, because I don't know how comfortable I would feel if some white dude had a podcast and he was talking about sexism and dismantling the patriarchy with other white dudes on his podcast and never checked in with any women. I'd be like, you might want to at least check in with some women every once in a while and ask them if they want to come on and talk about it. And it's not up to them, but if they're willing, then yeah. So I think it's beautifully said. And I agree with what you said. And yes, thank you.
There's a beautiful resource that I highly recommend. It's called Seen on Radio. And they're a podcast that have done 2 series, right, so far, that I'm in love with, the first series that they did was Seeing White. And it's, I don't know how many episodes there are, maybe 10 episodes on the history of whiteness in the United States.
Oh, wow.
And it's created by a white guy. And it's his exploration of his whiteness and the history of whiteness in this country. And he has brought on a Black man to support him in that conversation. And the Black man checks him and questions him. And, like it's beautiful. So now he's doing another series called Men. And it's all about patriarchy in our society.
Oh, I need to listen to that for my husband.
Oh, it's so good. And he brought on a woman of color to check him and to help him understand where he's not seeing things. Mm-hmm. But I like that he's doing this work because I don't want to be doing that work of educating men on patriarchy. I think it's important that he's doing that work, but that he is, like you said, checking in with somebody who can show him where he's biased, who can show him where he is unconsciously upholding the system. And it's the same thing for all of us. It's like we should not rely on the people of color in our lives to educate us, to be informing us constantly of where we're gone wrong. We have to support each other as white people. We have to be comfortable calling each other white as white people because we should not put that as labor onto people of color. At the same time, it's so important that we have people of color on to have these conversations because, it's their experience. Mm-hmm. Just like what you said, I would want to make sure that any podcast that's about patriarchy is including women because this is our experience.
Yeah.
And so we do have to be conscious of this, and it's complicated. It's not an easy answer. Everyone has to find their own line and what that looks like for them. But we do need to be having these conversations in our white spaces because the majority of spaces are white, and that's where we need to be. We need to be there talking about this stuff. This is how we're calling people in. This is how we're changing the individuals in our lives, and like as white people, we need to be having these conversations with our families, with our friends. We need to be calling out microaggression that's happening, racist jokes. Oh my gosh, I found the other day a meme and it was like the most amazing response to a racist joke. So like if somebody, in your family, in your friend puts out a racist, any type of joke that's inappropriate, right? Just say, I don't get it. And then, have a hot affect, like, I don't get it. And then watch them scramble trying to justify and explain their racist attitude.
Oh,
and
that's awkward.
I don't get it. And like,
what's funny about that?
Weird. So poignant because, eventually you can say, I don't think that's cool, dude. Right? Like, that's not appropriate. Like this is not something to be joking about. However way you want to check with that person. But, we need to be having these conversations amongst ourselves is what I'm.
Yes. I've had them with people in my regular life, and it is interesting. It's interesting and it's not easy, but it's absolutely 1,000% necessary. And again, it's building up the stamina to be able to sit with that discomfort when you say, I don't get it. And look at that person in the face with a straight face. And all it is stamina. And I know that you all can do it that are listening. Thais, thank you so much for your time today. I have so loved this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. Can I just leave one more final thought?
Absolutely.
The greatest thing that we can do for ourselves, whether it's tackling the worthiness wound, whether it's anything in the self-development, whether it's dismantling whiteness, patriarchy, white, cis, heteronormative, blah, blah, all of the isms, is our ability to sit with the discomfort. So I love that you said that because that is so critical. The more we can sit with our own discomfort, the more we can change things. And believe it or not, we can sit with uncomfortable experiences like shame and guilt. They're not going to break us.
No.
We get to do this work. We get to expand our capacity to be with what is uncomfortable, what arises within us. And wherever you need to get support to expand your capacity to be with these uncomfortable things, do it. Because that is what's going to allow us to truly rise up together and come together in a big, beautiful, different way than what we're seeing in our culture.
Yeah.
That's it. Now I'm done.
Thank you.
Okay.
And scene. No, I love that. And also I'm going to throw in one more link in the show notes, everybody. There is a Facebook forum called The Start, and I believe it's hosted by Rachel Cargill, and she may have handed it off to somebody, but it is specifically for white women who are just starting out in this conversation and they don't know how to respond to things or start a conversation with someone. And so it's a place where you can go to ask those, quote unquote, dumb questions that you're afraid to ask, and you can ask them there. So I'm going to post that link in the show notes. And Thais, tell everyone where they need to go so they can read all your blog posts and follow you on social media, etc.
Yeah, you can go to my website, taissky.com. That's where you can find all the things. And I'm predominantly on Instagram, and you can find me there at I am Thais Sky.
And of course, those links will be in the show notes. I highly encourage you all to, I love your writing. I love your Instagram posts and how open you are and honest. And I love following you. And I think everyone should go and follow you. And to all the listeners out there today, thank you so much for being here with us. I am so grateful for your time. I know how valuable it is. And I do not take that for granted that you come to spend it with me and my guests here on the show. And until next time, everyone, I will see you all out in cyberspace. Bye, everybody. Hey, did you know there's free secret podcast episodes waiting for you that are not part of my regular podcast feed? Yes. AndreaOwen.com/free. And you just sign up. You get a link sent to you. It's very secret. It's like a secret club. We don't have a secret handshake. Don't worry about that. But it's these motivating podcast episodes that I made for you. They're under 20 minutes each. There's 3 of them. They're for wherever you are in your life. So head on over there and grab them. They range from really supporting you and seeing you where you are and being compassionate, all the way to giving you a giant kick in your ass and telling you how amazing and gorgeous and phenomenal you are. So AndreaOwen.com/free, and get your hands on that free podcast feed.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Make another smart choice with Auto Quote Explorer to compare rates from multiple car insurance companies all at once. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.